Welcome back, everybody. A cool little show today. It's a bit of a shorter show. We've got Mr. Ben Hansen on the show today, and he is a bit pressed for time, so we told him we'd keep it short and on point, and I'm excited. What do you think, Jay?
I'm looking forward to this. He's been on TV and he's a fantastic guy to talk to. And I think you posted online not too long ago that he's coming on, and you mentioned that people were really reacting to this. So I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, he's super popular right now, and again, you've seen him on UFO Witness and some other shows. He's been doing it for a while, and we can ask him anything. And in our usual flavor, we're going to try to get right to the brass tacks of things. So stick around. We'll be right back with Mr. Ben Hansen. Welcome back to another episode of UAP Studies Podcast. My name is Louis Borges. Joining me as always, my good buddy, Jason Gilmet.
Hey, how's it going, Louis?
It's going really well. Excited for our guest today. You've seen this guy on the Discovery Channel. He's the host of UFO Witness. You've also seen him on shows like Ghost of Morgan City, Fact or Faked, among a few others. And he's somebody that's on the cutting edge right now of putting out good quality information. If you haven't checked out his shows, you definitely should. But we wanted to have a brief chat today with a friend of ours now, Mr. Ben Hansen. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for finding some time for us. We know you're a busy guy and you've got paid gigs, and this isn't one of them. So thank you for your time. But tell our guests or our viewers a little bit about yourself and what got you into this whole making TV shows about UFOs and aliens.
Well, the UFO subject's always been probably my first love into, I guess you could say. Back in the day, it all used to be called paranormal. And now they tend to say paranormal is the ghost stuff and UFOs is a separate thing, and now it's UAPs. And anyways, I remember like clipping out newspaper clippings in the 80s, and that was kind of my first thing. I was really into space, wanted to be an astronaut like the kids do. But every now and then I'd see these articles on these UFOs. In the 80s, it was a pretty big flap. This is when E came out. This is when, Close Encounters, that was the 70s. But it was like something to me that it was almost like forbidden to think about. And it was really geeky. I mean, like if you talked about UFOs, people like they put that in the tabloid section, the grocery store. And so I was afraid to tell anybody I was into it, except my parents really encouraged me. My dad would bring me books, and instead of like reading novels like most kids, I guess, do that they made in school, I would read Project Blue Book or, stuff about Roswell. And so I always had an open mind to it. And then later, through high school and stuff, I kind of stumbled into the paranormal ghost hunting things. And that's when the show Fact or Faked came along, and not to neg on any of the other TV shows, but a lot of them I think were kind of formed because someone was a good host and maybe an actor, right? And then they're like, hey, do you like the paranormal too? Instead of the other way around, where somebody was totally into this stuff and knew a lot, and then they're like, hey, do you want to do TV? So that was me. I never planned on being on TV at all. My degrees and background were in totally different things. But when the opportunity came along, they wanted to do just a ghost show, and kind of be a sister, show to Ghost Hunters, which was on Sci-Fi. And there's a lot of viral videos of YouTube and people, looking up stuff. And so that's how the concept we helped create was, but I convinced them, I give myself credit, you got to do UFOs. You got to do everything.
Yeah.
Right. Because there's so much of this, and people are putting out videos of things that are obviously hoaxed, some that, we're not sure. And people want to know what the truth is. So that's kind of how that was born. And then when I moved over to Travel Channel, I've done some ghost shows, but they kind of wanted me to take over the UFO stuff. And as you guys know, because you're totally into this, it's almost like you could teach a whole curriculum in a college, and there are people pushing for this to teach a degree in ufology. Like, there's enough info out there because it's all about history of the world, really.
Right.
Yeah.
And everything that you could cover and everything to know about cases and development of technology. So anyways, I could talk forever about that, but it's fascinating to me.
Well, there's two aspects to ufology. I think before 2017, that the big bombshell from the article for New York Times, that changed things in ufology. I think that more people came out of the woodworks and said, "Hey, I've had some experiences. Programs have started. Heck, this podcast started right after that, right?" So there was like a movement, but then there's the before where I couldn't even address the subject with coworkers at work without getting laughed at, right? And that lasted forever. And I just remember that growing up, I never shut up about my experiences and or my experience, I should say. And as a kid, but people just regarded me as being completely crazy. You lived through those times as well. Like, did you notice a shift after 2017? Like, were people treating you differently at that point?
Yeah, my shift probably came a little bit earlier though, because when I was into TV, you become kind of like the bartender, the psychologist that it's okay to talk to, right? So like,
Right.
if I'm sitting there and at a party or even a grocery store, and someone's like, "So what do you do?" And I say, "Well, I host TV shows and stuff," and they like, "Oh, what kind?" And then sometimes I'm a little embarrassed, or used to be. Oh, it's like ghosts and UFOs. Like, oh, really? And then they're like, let me tell you about the thing I saw. And so I think people were drawn to me earlier on than the 2017, but I think you're right in general. When that came out, it was almost like okay for people professionally, government wise, everything, for people to say like, well, they were waiting for that stamp of approval,
Right.
kind of from the government, and then also the 2001 release of the congressional report. And once they got the approval that said, look, we're not going to say it's alien, but it could be this other thing we don't know because we can't solve this, for the first time ever, then it is weird. But I think there has been a shift like that. And you'll see it in the survey polls with people, claiming that more that believe the government's not telling us everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find it interesting too that, we interview guys like Jim Semivan, a former CIA spy, and he's having experiences. Guys like George Knapp, who've been investigating it, they had weird things happen. And I saw you were on Entertainment Tonight talking about celebrities and their UFO encounters and experiences. Anything you can share in regards to that? Because it is a global phenomenon.
Yeah, and celebrities, it seems like they seem to, well, they both care and they don't care. Like when they come out and say something, and it's like they don't care standing out. Some of them, if they make, something that could be shocking, some news announcement. But we all care because I think people put them on a pedestal and they think, well, they're not like us. No, they're almost exactly, they watch the same shows, they do the same things. And so I've had a few of them, like that I've heard about. Like just the other day, for example, Ricky Schroeder had talked about some stuff he's seeing on his ranch, and you've got, of course, people who get into it, Demi Lovato and Jack Osbourne, and I've helped and done stuff with both of their shows, and it's like they get into kind of this quest of their own, so I think they do represent, in that sense, the majority of the population that are saying there's something to this. And like, are we ever going to see it in our lifetime? I think that's kind of like the place where people kind of differentiate themselves, is like the optimism, whether we're going to have disclosure or not.
Right.
So things are accelerating, though, I'd say.
We were talking about not too long ago about just experiences, and the amount of people that have had experiences, and that includes the celebrities, because even the people in the Department of Defense. I mean, we were talking about Jim Semivan. While he's a CIA agent, he wakes up in the middle of the night with three little gray guys, in his room. He's working for the Department of Defense, for crying out loud. Like, he's an active agent, and yet he's experiencing these, effects, or these entities. So for me, it's like, okay, if the people inside the Department of Defense are experiencing this, that means it's a lot more prevalent than, previously thought. I don't know what your thoughts are on the abduction phenomenon, but do you think that it's as much linked to this UAP issue, or like, what are your thoughts on the whole abduction?
Well, I kind of see it as a continuum. So if you have on the far left, like when, let's say you get into researching this and you're like, okay, I'm open to the possibility of sightings, right? Close encounters of the first, second kind. And then you go along the continuum. It's like, okay, well, if people have seen them, is it possible they've landed? All right, I'm open to that. And then have they physically interacted? And so you have your abductions. And not necessarily a logical linear progression, but you could say there's people way over here now who are saying they know the agenda,
Right.
right? And you get the hybridization programs and all of that. So it doesn't necessarily follow that just because you believe something back here that this also is true down here. But as far as abductions go, I had a real hard time with that, and I still do with lots of them, because um, there is obviously a larger proportion of people in this field of study who do have special conditions. I would say some of them, it might be mental health concerns, but also sleep paralysis or things that could be mistaken for it. But I think the most well-known and documented case is the Travis Walton one in my mind. And call it lucky or not, but he was lucky enough to have 6 other witnesses with him.
Right.
And so a lot of these cases that don't have that, they, like, you may never even heard of their story. But with Travis's, that he was physically gone for 3 days. You had 7 people taking polygraphs multiple times, law enforcement, everything, that the trace evidence that, that was found. It builds a really strong case that, if you want to call it an abduction, that something happened with an interaction from beings from another world or dimension. Right. So if
Yeah.
that one case might be true, that's what really opened my mind, that how can you just easily dismiss other things? Betty and Barney Hill, or the Pascagoula, case, or stuff like that. And so, as bizarre as it sounds, that's what really opened my mind to abductions. Now, that doesn't mean, though, that I get emails all the time. People are like, oh, well, okay, he believes, so let me tell you my story. I woke up and I was in a ship and everything, and they have nothing else, not their fault perhaps, but they have nothing else to say that it was nothing more than a really weird dream.
Right.
Does that make sense? And so
Yeah.
I don't put my stamp of approval on things and say this is true, this is not. Science is a matter of probability. And so I say, look, likelihood that something happened to Travis Walton, very likely in my book, but we weren't there, right?
Yeah.
So we don't know exactly how it happened.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think your new show UFO Witness does a good job at giving those people the opportunity to tell their story. And again, like, we get the same thing. People feel like we're a safe space, so they know they're not going to get judgment per se, so they tell us everything. And some of it's pretty crazy, like in a good way, and some of it is just like, you have to be crazy because there's no way, right? But
Yeah.
it's hard. But one thing I wanted to talk about is, on your show, and we've had a few people from your show, like Melissa Tittle, who's co-hosted a few episodes with you. She was on. Thomas
Mhm.
Ferrario we've had on. But to me, I found it interesting that in the last season anyway, the number of different species these people are reporting. They're not just grays. There's like mantid creatures and all this other stuff. So what are your thoughts on I mean, I guess it makes sense that it wouldn't just be one species. If there's one, there's probably millions. But what are your thoughts on the varying number of different kinds of encounters that people are reporting?
Well, I think you make an excellent point there too, that, there there's the really important thing is that you let people feel like they can talk and be open about it. And I feel kind of like I'm a journalist just gathering information in this series, because some of it is pretty far out there, and I try not to place my judgment on it. Sometimes the way that, the edit of the show comes out, it makes it sound like I'm full in on an agenda, perhaps, that they're like, they're here to invade us or something like that. And those topics are explored because those are theories that a lot of people are, pushing and saying this is what's going on. And then I get emails from people saying, well, you're not looking at the benevolent stuff and everything. I say, well, those are also important. This particular show and the witnesses have experienced very traumatic things. And I think just about anybody who has had a so-called abduction experience would not tell you that there was no tinge of fear initially. Some of them come to terms with it, but for most people, like, it's so weird and strange and scary, they're terrified at first. And some, change later and like, okay, I'm all right with it. So the point is, when it comes to the species, right? I don't think there had really been another show that tried to break down and look for the patterns. Now, drawing the connections, personally, I don't think there's enough information out there to say we explore the topic, but to definitively say these ones are flying this type of craft or this or that, there's just not enough info for that.
Right.
We listen to people, we try to draw patterns, but the truth is, I think a lot of this, like the Greys, for example, and people debate this. When did they come into pop culture? At what point? It may have been the movie that was done, Betty and Barney Hill in the late 60s, or Whitley Strieber, and the picture on communion, that face. But a lot of this stuff predates anything coming in the pop culture. So it's like, how were people coming up with these exact descriptions of reptilians or things like that? They didn't know each other, and kind of peeling that apart and seeing how there might be something to this, that they might be working together. It's a phenomena that is just so confusing and complex. What really turns me off, though, is when someone tells me they know the whole thing and they're like, no, these ones do this, that one does that. I'm a liaison to them. I know everything.
Right.
I'm like, well, I can't refute that, but I don't think anybody knows personally.
Well,
I think there's so much going on.
Yeah, but that's a problem within the realm of ufology. It's just there's a messiah complex, right? Like, I am the person that knows the answer,
Yeah.
or I will show you the answer, but for a fee. There's a lot of people that do that, right? So and that's a problem, right? And I think we mentioned that before in another podcast that what's more important is that, especially in this field, is that we all get along, right? We don't have to have the same theories or the same ideas, but that we get along, because there's no definitive proof. There's nobody that knows the answer, at least not one person, right? So that's cool that you said that. Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And it comes to the sightings as well, because one, the things I've been doing recently with these, the pilot reported UAP sightings, the likelihood that most of this stuff now, which I fully admit in the videos I've been making, that I had brought up the idea that there might be some new configuration of satellites, and that some orbits we don't understand, and ways that they look like they're turning, they may not be. And I brought that up, but I gave it a very low likelihood, and looking into it and researching it more, I do believe the majority of these are probably some new satellite. But what I don't understand, like, why can't we all go back to like high school science, and learn the scientific method again? What is wrong with people? Like, scientists, if ever a scientist, and I had a professor who told me this. I took a class in my undergrad, and it was called "Does ET Exist?" It totally fulfilled one of my undergrad requirements. It was an awesome class. But at the very end of it, after building up all of these theories in the Drake equation, we talked about all this. He says at the very end, he says, okay, knowing everything that we've studied now, it's impossible that ET could be here. It's impossible. And we're like, what? And he says, he started bringing up the same tired explanations of, like, it's too far to travel. When you approach light speed, the mass of the craft gets bigger, blah, 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 blah. It's not possible. And we know everything there is, 99% of what there is to know about physics. And I just laughed at him. How the hubris of these people to claim that humans know that much. And so when I approach things now in the same way, I say, look, there's a probability of what we know now that this is the likelihood explanation, that it is likely that it is explained. Otherwise, we get new information, theories are refined, they change, and we have outlier cases, things that just don't fit that mold, and you can't just toss that out. That's where we make grave errors. That's where wars are lost. That's where civilizations crumble because they didn't see that one thing, that was like they should have been looking at, but they had this confirmation bias in their mind. So anyways, that's just kind of like how I try to approach it, and to have an open mind, and where the facts lead you is where it leads you.
You've got a quote on your website that says, always stay curious and you'll never be bored. And I really like that. Our motto is, are you paying attention? Like, are your eyes open? Are you looking, or are you paying attention? There's a difference. So in terms of curiosity and in your own personal quest to find answers, what's your brain chewing the fat on right now? Like, what's getting your mind going, and what are you thinking about these days?
Well, yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because I hate the word bored. I don't even know what bored is. Like, I hear people during COVID, I'm so bored. I'm like, so you can't go to work physically and now you're bored. Like, is there nothing else in life that besides going to work and earning money? And, like, I'm one of the lucky ones, I think, where I really love what I do, but being curious about anything really is what drives me. And so I'm so busy because I never let myself just sit there and say, like, okay, what do I do? Right. So at the moment, I think that the thing that is most interesting, like we've talked about, is how the government seems to have a stake and a vested interest in this now. And we're seeing academia start to break down its walls, letting some other professors, like Avi Loeb or Gary Nolan or people talk about it. And so now we're having real conversations, and that to me is exciting, right? And so I kind of have my feet in a lot of worlds. I'm trying to help academia structure some lectures and series and things like that. I'm trying to talk to people up at Capitol Hill, trying to change some policies regarding pilot reported sightings, so they don't feel retribution or like they're going to lose their job for reporting it. Right. And then I'm working with the population in general and people, and trying to, well, I don't know that I really have an agenda there. I just feel like if there is a shift and there's a change coming, how much of it's going to be in our control or not is up for debate. But, I recently did my thesis on these types of reality shifting events. And if it's not done properly, I think we could be headed for something really dangerous. Not necessarily from whoever they are, right? People might be right. They might be completely peaceful and no problem there. But the idea that we're being visited will clash with a lot of people's belief systems. And it only takes a small amount of people, not a majority at all, a small amount of that critical mass to create what we call cascading effects. Right. And then, we saw part of that in COVID, got a small taste of it, but we are so interconnected across the globe, supply chains and everything else. All it takes is for a couple weeks shutdown for a country or the world to say, like, let's take a breather and absorb what we just heard, this news. And few people panic, and violence and banks on the run, everything, the whole system comes down.
Yeah.
So I'm not a doom and gloom person, and I'm not here to say that we're going to be vaporized by a ray gun from, the ETs or anything. I'm more worried about the people.
Yeah.
I'm more worried about us and how that's going to happen if it's not done properly.
Even talking about the technology that these things have in reverse engineering, it's more dangerous for us to reverse engineer this technology than them posing a threat to us. Because I think for us, it's always about weaponry. We talked about that on the previous episode. It's always about, using the new technology for weaponry. How can we use this to kill people? Everything that we have in our homes, like even the microwave, was first invented by the military. And now it's like a regular thing that we all have at home. But every new technology comes from somewhere. And I'm just more worried about them doing something stupid with the technology we yet don't understand, especially from, we keep hearing about crash retrievals and reverse engineering and all that jazz. And if it's true that it happens, I'm more worried about that. Just, us doing something stupid.
Yeah, and I think we're kind of seeing the same thing that happened, in late 40s when, we discovered that our country had invented the nuclear bomb, right? It's like, that's why that is the highest, well, aside from perhaps the UFO stuff that, that's up there too, but the most highly regarded secret and classified work is to make sure that nuclear technology doesn't get into bad actors' hands, right?
Right.
And we have all of these nations we treat like children, basically, because they're like, no, you have a history of producing dictators and crazy people who would easily push the button, so we can't let you have it. And so, yeah, I don't know that it would be much different if we had something like that, energy directed weapon that could just vaporize a whole country.
Yeah.
We'd have those same fears. Again, it goes back to fearing ourselves, fearing people and how we treat each other, so not really what they're doing. In the Reagan years, the Star Wars initiative and all that talk was basically, I think, couched within, hey, we're afraid of Russia and everyone else, we got to put satellites up, but there was a large part of it like, we got to protect ourselves from them, whoever they are. But in reality, come on, how many thousands or millions of years would we be behind in them, in technology? So we're kind of at their mercy, but at the same time, you have to be focused on national security, global security, and not just pretend that there aren't some that might have ill will towards us. So it's a lot of things at once.
Yeah. Even sorry, Louis.
Go ahead. No,
yeah, I was
go
gonna
ahead.
say, even talking with some of the people we've had on, they'll mention things like, people being tucked back into bed after being taken. So most people are brought back, as far as we understand.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they wouldn't have a tale to tell. And it's not like, they've seen, people just out the airlock, once they're done with them. That's what we would do as a species. We'd abduct something and throw it out the airlock. They have plenty more.
Well, there's some theories like that though, right? I mean, like, I still get people telling me, like, what do you think about the, tens of thousands of people missing in Alaska? And I was like, I think it was created for a fake documentary called The Fourth Kind, right? We don't have documentation that actually happened, but there are people and there are books that try and tie perhaps the tens of thousands of people go missing every year, right?
Yeah.
Something strange like that maybe they are tossing them out. But you're right, it's all speculation for the most part. It seems like, if Bob down the street, had an abduction, that he comes back.
Yeah.
So I guess there's that.
Yeah. And, they often get told, we're not here to harm you, or this is going to be okay. So they try to calm us down, as freaky as probably that experience might be for these people. But at least I understand that they're trying not to freak the shit out of us. But
they're not wearing clown masks with butcher knives.
Yeah, they come at you looking like it. Yeah,
that would be worse for sure.
Yeah.
Ben, I know we don't have a whole lot of time with you today, but I wanted to ask, like, what's in store for you for 2023? UFO Witness continuing? Are you working on anything else?
So we're still waiting to hear back. Generally, I say that I can't comment on anything, because if it had been purchased, they want to make the announcements first. But
sure.
Basically, the network stuff is doing their network stuff. They had a merger with Time Warner, and a lot of it just has to do with budgeting. There's a lot of shows waiting, to get renewed. We really hope that it will. But I'm continuing doing mostly YouTube stuff, creating these videos on these pilot reports and trying to work with, like I said, different people up on Capitol Hill, and trying to get some change, here involved. And we're all waiting for the new UAP report. I don't really think much is going to come out in it, but it's going to generate more discussion. And hopefully it's not an effort to shut down the conversation, and that there's actually more unknown, more, hey, this is what we're doing, we agree with you, let's bring new witnesses. A new round of that would be great, with the UFO, with the congressional hearings, we've been hearing that they're serious about doing that again. So there's a lot of momentum, and I just try to kind of trot alongside of it, and whoever wants to have me join in, whether it's helping, contact Congress or stuff like that, I'm happy to help. And so I think a lot of that. And then if there's TV shows that come along, there's a lot of great stories, a lot of great things that haven't been told yet. So I think it's going to be a big year.
And where can people find you? What's the name of your YouTube channel?
The YouTube is called Hypocenter 101, and it's kind of a long word. So probably the easiest way is just to go to my Twitter, and Facebook, because I always post on Twitter, and then that will guide you to it. But it's Ben Hansen 00, HANSEN 00 is all my Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and I post the links there. And then there's a whole channel playlist now. Sometimes people come in and they just click on the one video and they like, this is satellites, or how could you say this is satellites? I'm like, well, unfortunately, something that's complex, and I'm not just saying this so that I get the clicks on my channel, but some things do require you listen and you read, right? And people want to make up their mind right away. And I'm like, if you really want an informed opinion, go back and see how this whole thing broke in August and the progression of where we've gone and what we've looked at, and then form your opinion. I do the same thing. Like, if somebody comes out and says, what do you think about the such and such case? I was like, well, I haven't read any books on it yet. I'm sorry. Do you think so-and-so is a hoaxer? Like, my gut tells me there's something going on, but I'm not going to make an opinion until I have an informed opinion.
Right.
And that takes time. If it's worth having an opinion, it's worth doing your own research. So anyways, it's my little soapbox to tell people, if any of this matters to you, you got to pick up some books and you got to spend some time researching and looking into it.
Well said. Louis, do you got any final questions for our guest today?
No, again, thanks again, Ben. I know we're pressed for time. Really appreciate you cutting out a little piece of time for us. Maybe in the new year or later on in 2023, we can get together, give us an update on what you're working on. But big fans of your work. I know a lot of our viewers are as well. And we wish you all the best and hope you keep killing it.
Awesome. Thank you. Absolutely. We'll do it again.